So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the Track Extra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Downs, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, which is, as I expect you know, the English-speaking world's largest, and we like to think the best, mystery animal research group. But this is quite an odd episode for you, because I am speaking to you from Musgrove Park Hospital in Taunton, where I've been an inpatient for the last week, having my toe amputated. It was far less dramatic than it sounds, didn't hurt at all, and it hasn't really seemed to have affected my balance in any way. But I'll be very glad when I get home again. In fact, by the time you see this, I will be home, but I thought it would make sense to actually do some broadcasts from the hospital just so you could see what it was all about. Now, every Wednesday evening at about 6:30 for about a quarter of an hour, and every Saturday afternoon at 3 for twice that, we bring you a miscellany of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality, I hear you ask? Well, having a fat man stripped to the waist, introducing a program about cryptozoology from a hospital ward in Taunton, I think that's pretty surreal. But if not, have a word with the dog.
Oh, that's surreal, all right. It's Boston now, kid.
And here we are, back in North Devon. Welcome to another episode of On the Track Extra. And what are we going to be talking about this week? Well, I want to talk about this. Regular viewers will know that Richard Muirhead is a very, very old friend of mine. I've known him since he was 5 or 6 and I was 11. And he is as well as a hard-working volunteer with the Centre for Fortean Zoology and the commissioning editor for both Animals and Men and for the CSZ yearbook, he is the editor of this wonderful little magazine, Flying Snake. And so whenever a new issue of Flying Snake comes out, I like to tell you all about it. Well, what do we have in this issue? Well, it starts off with part 3 of a long article which originally appeared in the Devonshire Association way back in the 19th century and covers the white bird of Oxenham Manor, which is a death omen which was supposed to appear over Oxenham Manor whenever a member of the family died. It goes into great detail. It's something that I read many years ago when I was first researching the mystery animals of Devon and Cornwall, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's an absolutely fascinating article. And then we go to Richard Muirhead and another old acquaintance of mine whose writing I have always very much appreciated. He's a guy called Shane Lee, and he is talking at mystery giant salamanders. Now, there is an area in parts of Northern California and Washington State, deep in the heart of Sasquatch country, called the Trinity Alps. And in the Trinity Alps, there is supposedly a giant salamander. According to official zoology, the only giant salamanders in the world are in China and Japan, the Cryptobranchidae and the hellbenders of the eastern and central United States. One of the best summaries of the reports of these giant salamanders in California and Washington State was written by good old Lauren Coleman in 14 Times number 103 back in October 1997. But going through the stories of these enormous salamanders which have been reported in the Trinity Alps, the original reports came from somebody called Thomas Rogers, who wrote up sightings for someone called Frank Griffiths and something called and in Copier, June 1951, number 2, pages 179 and 180, George Myers wrote an article, Asiatic Giant Salamander Caught in the Sacramento River. He wrote, in 1939 or 40 I received a message to the effect that a Sacramento commercial fisherman had caught a strange animal which he had alive in his apartment. The animal was a fine Megalobactracheus, unquestionably identified generically by its closed gill openings, in perfect condition, alive in a wooden trough suspended in the bathtub, where I handled and examined it carefully for about 30 minutes. It was between 25 and 30 inches length. Its captor said he found it in one of his catfish traps set in the Sacramento River. Well, the stories go on, and there are more accounts of eyewitnesses, there are more accounts of people claiming to have caught one, and as regular viewers of this show will know, last year we interviewed old friend Ken Gerard. We had him on the show talking about an expedition that he had led into the Trinity Alps looking for the giant salamander. Could it be possible that the Asian giant salamanders have got a North American relative? Could it even be possible that through some human vector, Asian giant salamanders were brought for food by Japanese or Chinese immigrants to the western United States and they escaped? Or could there be a completely new species, maybe even a completely new genus of salamanders which mirror Megalobactracheus in all their ways? I am fascinated by Megalobactracheus because back in the early 1990s, when I first started the Centre for Fortean Zoology, I wrote about claims by none other but than Boulanger himself that there was a second species of giant salamander, this time in second species of Chinese giant salamander, this time in Hong Kong and Guangdong. And guess what, kiddies? Everybody said I was an idiot, and that Sligo salamander, as Boulanger called it, was an out-of-date synonym for the Chinese giant salamander. But guess what, kiddies? Guess who got proved right a few years ago? And Darren Naish was sweet enough to write to me and tell me that I had been proved right all along. It's something I've always been interested in, and I've always been interested in the folklore of salamander-like creatures such as the Japanese kappa, which have been reported from various places, mainly in Asia. Now, let's have a look here. That's followed by Michaela de Mattei's big article here about the 2015 Tasmanian Tiger sighting in southern Tasmania. It was taken from personal notes on the Thylacine provided directly by witness Greg Booth in 2016 to Adrian Richardson. The sighting has long been told only in words. It travelled orally from one person to another, then in this empathetic channel has finally found a written publication. Absolutely fascinating. And the fact that the scientific establishment are now beginning to suspect and even say in public that it is looking more and more likely that the thylacine survived in the wild until the early part of this century. And if it died out then? Why isn't it still around now? I think it makes articles like this, which are well reasoned, well argued, and very well illustrated, very cleverly illustrated, all the more valuable. Now let's see what comes next. I always find this really quite exciting. I go through this for the first time with you, so I don't read them until after I have reviewed it. And I find this absolutely exciting. Now we have an article by one of my favourite Fortean researchers, a guy called Richard George, who is reporting on skunks found wild in Britain. And this is something that apparently even the Daily Mail in 2009 published an article about a colony of striped skunks in the Forest of Dean. The Forest of Dean, like Richard George says, must be getting quite crowded, what with wild boars, big cats, unidentified homunculi, and even yeti-like creatures. It's one of those places where all sorts of weird things are being kept. Now, in 2007, although skunks were kept quite legally across the UK, it was made illegal to descent them, and this apparently led some breeders to let their stock loose, in a repeat of what happened with the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976, when breeders and pet owners let go their treasured big cats because they couldn't afford to keep them anymore, and it was now illegal to keep them without a license. There are so many sightings. Tredegar, I believe that's in Wales. Tredegar 3 discovered in 2009, Stourport in Worcestershire, a roadkill 1, and this was from 2010. 2015, one turned up in Coventry. 2017, one turned up in Surrey, and one was also captured by a pest controller. Worksop 2021, there was another one. Sheffield 2022, Colchester 2022, and even one turned up on the ITN News. It's a habitat generalist and can survive in temperatures ranging from northern Mexico to Canada, and so naturalisation in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe is a distinct possibility. There have already been brief colonisations in Germany in 1994 and the Netherlands in 2000. And anybody who can leave the article by mentioning Jeff Skunk Baxter, the sublime guitarist with Steely Dan, is okay by me. So what have we got next? We have a lady called Kate Shaw of the Strange Animals podcast, talking about the deep-sea arachnid mystery of a spider-like creature which was picked up on a remotely operated camera at the bottom of the sea. That is fascinating. I've heard about that before, but I didn't know that so much information had been gathered about it. Well done, Kate. And then we have Richard Muirhead and Bob Skinner talking about ant mills, and Richard Muirhead and Bob Skinner talking about ice spikes. And then a guy called Grant White talking about mystery cats, and notes and queries including a bipedal fox, a Washington state axolotl, a monster butterfly, an alligator found in a New York City pond, and a remarkably peculiar story that a letter written in February 1916 arrived at its destination at a flat in South London more than 100 years later. There's a four-eyed snake, a monster frog, and a giant ball off the Japanese coast. And there's a new species of spider in Australia, more about the South African flying snake, a giant Japanese frog, a dog-fox hybrid, more about that, which is something that has always fascinated me, and a black puma in Guatemala. And it's talking about the black-veined white butterfly, which, as I'm sure regular viewers of this show will remember, we talked about last week. And there's a mystery cat in Macclesfield, which is where Richard Muirhead lives and my ancestors used to live, and various excerpts from Fate and other things just seem to be absolutely fascinating and completely bizarre. And there goes another issue, and I will take this issue upstairs with me, and it will reside by my bed for the next few weeks while I dip into it as I'm trying to disappear off into the arms of Morpheus, whereupon, once it's finished, it will go into the library, which, coincidentally, is being arranged by Richard Muirhead later this month. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I sincerely hope that people will contact Richard Muirhead at this location and subscribe to the magazine, because it's a very, very good magazine. It's one that truly deserves your respect. I'll be back doing something on Saturday at 3 o'clock, and I will be back again next Wednesday doing something else that I have no idea. So, I think I am going to go back to resting my foot and being a silly old man who can't even tell the difference between two common words that I'm supposed to know because I use them on an almost daily basis. So, until then,